They had to go and shoot. Sorry, I just knocked my camera over, so I'm going to say all that again. Yes.
Hey, Internet! It's Paul. It's Matt, the Dork Lords. We're here today talking about Loki, Season 2, Episode 2, Breaking Brad. Hey, comedy gold. Alright, we open with Loki, Mobius, and B-15 journeying to the sacred timeline in search of Sylvie by way of Hunter X5. X5's tempad suddenly went dark. Our heroes think it's because he encountered Sylvie, so they journey to 1977 London, where they find X5 hiding out and living the good life as a famous film actor named Brad Wolfe, hence the title. They attend the premiere of his new film Zaniac, obscure Thor villain reference, chase him down and capture him through the use of some fairly powerful Loki magic. I'm not sure that we've ever seen him control shadows like that before, but okay, all right.
That's
note to
powerful? Okay.
Well, I mean, he had shadows on the wall, like, restrain
I feel like,
him.
that's what falls within the purview of illusion.
All right, in his mind, he thought the shadows were controlling him, maybe. We end with Sylvie returning to her branch timeline, her fast food service gig in 1982 Broxton, Oklahoma. And I guess it's now one of the few branch timelines left after General Dox's mass timeline pruning mission. So, Paul.
Yes?
What'd you think of episode 2?
I liked it. I think it's another solid episode. The things that I liked were strong, and the things that I didn't like didn't detract too much from it. I still think it could be better, so a 7 is what I would give it. Maybe 7.5, maybe slightly more than last week.
So you think it's a little better than last week? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, a little better. Because, the two hearts of it, I would say, are, one, the sort of meeting between Sylvie and Loki, and I thought that was good. Mm-hmm. And the interrogation. Mm-hmm. The stuff, we got more with Ke-Hu Kwan. It's Obi. We got more with him. And that's all good. So yeah, I was pretty satisfied with it.
Very nice.
I'm hoping, I've only watched it once, so I'm hoping that it stands up well. Like, one of the things I experienced with the last season, the first season, is that there are a lot that scenes where it's like, okay, get to the good part, get to the good part, get to the good part.
Okay.
And this, there were moments of that, but I feel not as much. Like, even the chase, I was like okay with, because that was like, did you need a chase? But okay, maybe a little bit of chase just to establish.
Yeah,
fine.
I think it was an excuse to show his magical prowess. Like, he conjures up an entire gang of
and I feel like we didn't get
it.
enough of that in the first season.
I agree.
Where you sort of like, oh yeah, he's got powers.
Right, he's not just a dude. Yeah.
He will actually use them to
accomplish his goals.
That's how he. Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, okay, if he's going to compete with somebody, those are his tools.
I actually didn't think it was quite as good as last week's episode. I still liked it, but I would, whereas I gave last week, I think I gave it an 8. I think I would give this more of a 7.
Okay.
I felt like there were a little bit of pacing issues. And again, I generally liked the episode, and I'll talk about what I liked here, but I did feel like we spent a long time interrogating Brad. I thought there was some really good acting going on there. But then I felt like it was just like, it was the last few minutes. It felt like they crammed in the defeat General Doc's plotline. I mean, the fight lasted for literally a minute. There was a sense of loss about all the timelines being pruned, but it was only registered as lines on a graph. I think there were better ways to sell the weight of those actions, maybe. Anyway, I just felt like they needed to get through that so they could get on with the story, and they took the shortest route.
It's funny. We don't know yet where they're going to go with it.
Right.
So I'm wondering if they're trying to establish the danger of it by having to look at all those timelines, okay, this is, really budding now, and then having the group sort of set them back just so you can see, okay, this is what might come. So,
Yeah.
even though I don't, they're not, it's not down to one timeline still, so there's still other
Right.
timelines. And so maybe that's a way of managing the story. We'll see where they go, but that's my feeling about what's going on there. Yeah, I guess they could have gotten more, and if that general was actually the villain, then maybe I would have felt bad about the fact that she was disposed of so quickly and her plan. But thank God that's not the story of the season.
But it almost might have been a better end to this episode to be, to finish with the stinger of like, oh, by the way, this plot is happening. General Dox is trying to destroy the timelines. We need to stop her or something like that.
That's why I'm glad that
credits.
it was disposed of, because I'd rather that not be the story.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I hear you.
It's better to say, okay, it's really because they spent the first season and the first episode and half the second episode establishing, oh no, we got a ticking time clock because of we got to fix this problem with all these timelines and the loom and everything. And so this kind of gives them more time. Before, they felt sad about the stuff that had happened when they didn't know it was happening. But now they had, a situation where they knew what was going to happen and it still happened. So they can actually grieve that stuff in a way that they couldn't before.
Yeah. It is true that while we'll say the good guy TVA folks, have been doing that all of their very long lives. This is the first time that they had seen pruning happen, knowing that, I don't know, that they're variants. It's a little weird because you think back to when they were pruning timelines, they still knew they were killing off people, right? I mean, they were just like, oh, it's for the good of all life. I mean, they were going to a timeline where there were a whole bunch of people, and then they were setting off a charge and ending it. But yes, this was the first time where they really just realized, oh, these are us. Like, oh wow, we were these people, and now they're all gone. Here's a question though: if General Dox pruned the vast majority of variant timelines,
yes,
shouldn't the temporal loom be back to essentially normal working order again? Wasn't the whole problem that there were too many timelines trying to pass through the loom, and they're like, oh, everything's going crazy? It feels like that problem might be resolved now, but I don't think the show is saying that problem is resolved.
Right. Well, I mean, we have to ask ourselves what caused the problem in the first place, right? He who should not be named or whatever was killed.
He who remains, yeah.
He's
Voldemort.
Yeah, he's still dead.
Yeah.
So, and they did try to stop pruning stuff. I think it was his death that precipitated the problem. At least that's my interpretation of it. They still had a problem with having to prune it, right? Their natural state is, there's a problem, let's go prune it. So for a time they didn't do that, and it got real bad, and then they over pruned for a while to cut down on the stuff. So if they just stopped the pruning, you're still going to have problems of timelines branching off. So it's not like, oh, well.
Right, no, you're right. The problem will eventually just grow back again.
Yeah.
I think is what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
So maybe
but
they just have more time in that. It's not like, they're just going crazy.
So, yeah. As we suspected, it seems like Renslayer and Miss Minutes are in cahoots. They saw messages between them. The good guys now have a lead on Renslayer's location. And we also know that OB can't fix the temporal loom without Kang's temporal aura to open the doors. So hence, I think the good guys are going to go in search of Renslayer.
Yeah.
They will find her because she's in love with Kang. She's going to be hanging out with Kang variant Victor Timely in 19th century Chicago.
Oh, that makes sense.
Boom. And then they're going to bring Victor back to the TVA to fix the loom. That's what I thought. Anyway, but that's how that goes. But just to go back to what your point, you were saying that you really enjoy the fact that the majority of these first two episodes has not been spent on, hey, we have to do this, weird plot thing. It's more of just these conversations people are having. We're learning more about character development, and it's these quiet conversation moments that I think this show is really excelling. You mentioned Loki and Sylvie.
Yes.
That was really, really good. Loki and Mobius, the pie eating scene, I thought that was really good as well. I love the fact that there's an entire cafeteria dedicated to slices of key lime pie. I'm gonna look for the one that's like dedicated to chocolate souffles. Wherever that one is, let's go eat there.
I thought that was good. I didn't think it was very good.
Okay.
One of the things I might have improved on it is, okay, so I think it was important that they were talking about basically the motivation of the characters. And it was interesting that Hunter, what's his name again? Brad.
Hunter X5.
Brad, yes. That he was the one who was sort of pulling out their sort of details of their character. And initially, of course, he did it to sort of foil them in their attempts to interrogate him. However, they used that against him. So, he was establishing that Loki was, really bad and evil, and his attempts to be good are
everything you do screws things up.
Right, exactly. So it's like, okay, fine, then I'll just succumb to that then. And the people that he trusted, they who would protect him, but even though he was saying that they were hypocritical or what they were doing is futile or whatever, he pushes them out of the room. I think you could assume, I think it would have been nice if Brad had stated it, that he is in line with the efforts of the general or whatever, that he, that's why he went to the main timeline, because he wanted to be safe, and until...
Right. I think you're right. I think there was at least an implication that, yes, he obviously knew what the general was doing.
Right.
And went to it, the sacred timeline, which is the one timeline that they wouldn't be pruning. So, yeah, it makes sense.
But I'm not crazy about, this whole thing about how you want to be a windsurfer or whatever. I just haven't, I'm not in love with that. It's like, it's not less a finesse or whatever that I would like, or, it's a little too thin, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Sort of motivation for a character to me.
I did like, though, that notion where Loki's like, well, haven't you ever, wondered, and in Mobius's mind, he just set up a blank wall. He's like, I don't want to know.
Yes, no,
that if I know, it's going to make me... I'll never be able to get it out of my head. What could have been?
Yeah, they're doing a good job of establishing that. Part of my what I would wish worked better is him trying to go off or whatever, like because of Brad telling him that that didn't quite work for me. It's like
here's what I think is going to happen. I think because he has a line in there where he's shutting down Loki's. Hey, you should go check. He says, I'd like to thank the guy who kidnapped me and brought me here and got me this pie.
Right. Yeah, so clearly they're setting that up.
Yeah, I think Mobius is going to kidnap himself. I think he's gonna go back to Mobius, whatever Mobius is, Brad 2.
Okay.
Is gonna be working like at a jet ski dealership, and Mobius is going to essentially kidnap himself.
Interesting.
And take him, because he knows, like, you belong in the TVA. What you do in the TVA matters. This is the life that I want to lead, and I'm going to have this. That's my thought, anyway.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like trying to think about that, whether or not I think how that would work, right? Because I guess if he gets himself from a different timeline, then it doesn't mess up his own. Because, I don't think we talked about this very much at all, but the whole way that they're changing how...
They did change the nature of time travel and how it affects its immediate changes. Yeah.
You've expressed the reason why you don't like it is because of how it affects the story. But for me, less about the story and how...
You're saying time travel in general is what you're saying.
Yeah, you want to have rules that work. That makes sense. And so, if you have things that have to come up with all these rules or whatever, sometimes it can feel clever to come up with the rules that fit, but, I feel like constraints are a good thing. Story constraints are a good thing, and
Agreed.
and the reason why we like stories is because they have constraints, and so as we do in life, so the drama comes from how you overcome constraints, and so it's better to have a situation where it's like and the first episode was they had to
go back in time and then tell OB to create the temple.
Well, no, I was thinking about the whole thing
there.
about trudging through that time situation, and Loki having to prune himself out of the time or whatever. All that was the constraints that they had to work through. So anyway, so that's my concern, I guess. Which you can another thing that just makes the story a little too easy, maybe.
While it is fun, especially in this kind of the comedic stylings of this particular show, it works with it, the frenetic kind of quality of it. I do feel like if this was MCU as a whole, you had a whole bunch of folks that could literally just step back in time, change something, and it completely changes what's happening in the moment. Because you'd either see that all the time and then you'd be like, that's annoying, or you'd be like, well, why didn't they just go back and change it?
I mean, I feel like most time stories work that way, right? At least, I mean, they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to do that, and at some point they say, well, everything's good now, so we're not going to go back in time. It's like, okay, but would somebody else go back in time to make it the way they want?
Else, or will it not be good tomorrow?
The story just ends, and that's, we got what we wanted out of time travel, so we're happy. I think the reason why this hasn't been especially bad is that, they haven't gained all that much from the time travel. And, of course, they still could. So it's unfortunate, maybe we said maybe we haven't. They've done it for comedy's sake. At least one of the reasons, anyway. And the other reason may be just because, they're so used to it, and so is the audience. So, so some of it's funny. If you contrast this with Everything Everywhere All at Once, that wasn't about time travel. It's all about all these different variants, all these different, jumping between worlds and all that.
Timeline versus time travel.
And so we are still, in this 2 episodes, aren't actually seeing much of the frenetic pace that we got in Everything Everywhere and All at Once. Most of it's jumping back and forth in time. So
in the same time, essentially the sacred timeline, except for Sylvie goes to the branch time.
Right. And we don't know. No one suggests that Loki went into a different future. No one.
True.
Because he back into his own past, and then of course he went to his own future. So
and that's in a way reasoning for trying to bring Sylvie back. Like, look, I went to the future, and you were there, and you were trying to get me. And I think she even kind of brings up the point. I'm not sure she specifically states it, but I think she says something like, "How do you know that's the future?" I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, you realize how easy it is to change the future in this show, but.
Well, and that's the thing, right? If they only were sticking with that, where I guess you'd have to find a different reason to make it dramatic. But yes, that whole thing about I've seen the future and now we have to figure out what that means, rather than it being an event. Maybe there's another Sylvie, maybe there's and hopefully there is. That'd be a nice twist. They learned the wrong lesson, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I still appreciate the conversations that these characters are having. That's not always a strong suit of shows, and it is a strong suit of this particular show, and it's great.
Additionally, I was not sure whether or not that interrogation was going to go as well as it did.
Right, because we talked about interrogations in Secret Invasion. If you remember, you're like, I don't really like this whole killing people and stuff.
Well, it's like, if you're just like, okay, we're only going to get information if we threaten the person's life, we hurt them, cause them physical pain. And I've been watching a lot of interrogations through cop shows of NYPD Blue. And, what you want to do is understand the person and figure out exactly what they need to give you information. But one thing that was interesting to me, I noticed, is that we actually didn't learn all that much about Brad. It was more about, Loki and Hunter B-15 and Mobius.
Mobius.
So they really were establishing those motivations. So that's why I thought it was clever the way they. It's like, okay, let's set up, and it really was actually. I would argue that this episode really showed not only how Loki has his powers and he can pursue a prey and use his multiple images and shadows and everything to get the best of a situation, but he's like, hey, I'm, emotionally volatile, but I'm smart, and so I'm going to use that to sort of get the best of a situation. So it's hard for me to think of.
Of course, we saw him being interrogated himself in the Avengers movie. A turnabout fair play kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, but here he was on that end of it, and so and the whole thing about the torture device that is really like a motorboat, was nice. Had nice comedic effects. So I really like that part because I really felt like I think you could make an argument that this was the most Loki we've seen him in across the entire series.
Yeah. No, I agree. And he gives a line that I liked it in the moment, but I also felt like I'm not sure that I believe it. But it's the one. It's actually in the pie eating scene. Mobius confesses, like, okay, hitting Brad wasn't tactical. I lost it. And so then Loki says, "Oh, remember the time I got so angry at my father and brother that I went down to Earth, held a whole city of New York hostage with an alien army, threw Tony Stark off a roof. Like, I lost it." Which is a great line. I appreciate it all. That was good. I do feel like it was a little more calculating, though, than I lost it. I felt like that was a long play.
Perhaps, yes. That clearly was a line for a comedy.
Right. But similarly, what you were just saying, like he plays off this idea of being volatile, but he's actually very cunning about it.
Yes.
And so it's not simply like he snaps. There's a method to the madness.
Perhaps, yeah, or perhaps some retconning of, his behavior in that movie.
Yep. A couple of funny lines I liked as well elsewhere. I liked when they go to OB and they're having him look at the temp pad, and then he looks like, "Oh yeah, I can break into this." And he's like, "Do you think this is a higher priority than a temporal meltdown?" And they're like, "Nah, stay focused on the temporal meltdown. That's okay. Temporal meltdown. That's better." Which I thought was a good line.
Yeah. And they made good use of Casey, because he was doing this sort of busy work. And then he was like, okay, I can work on this. I can do
he's
this
memorized the manual.
Yes. Yeah, that was very, very nice, his scene with Obi, where he's like, oh, you're the one. So he could be a fanboy.
That's actually another great funny bit.
Yeah.
Is when he's fanboying over OB. But I thought there was an extra little joke in there. Maybe you could probably explain it away, but I think it was an intentional, like, haha, where he's like, "Oh, you sure it's in the manual?" I was like, "Yeah, I wrote it."
Yes.
You're Ouroboros? And then he goes through this whole thing, and then he goes, "Will you sign this for me?"
Yeah.
And then he says, "Yeah, just sign here next to your picture," and they just cut away from it. But I'm like, he's this guy who's memorized the book.
Yeah.
He is his most, like, oh my god, the guy who wrote this book is my hero.
Yes.
And he didn't recognize him. I think it's just a ha-ha there of, like, he's standing right next to the guy and he didn't know it, and he's like, yeah, just sign next to your picture.
It could be.
Anyway.
Yeah, or maybe it's a sort of I would assume that maybe you just looked like this guy.
Yeah, or
because he doesn't know how long he's been there.
Yep. But it's just funny because I actually prefer
either
it
of them been there, right? Because his memory. Yes, it could be. Like you could have known this if you missed.
Yeah, because they established that he knows every word of this thing.
Yes.
Anyway, so that was good.
Yeah, I even liked some of the. I thought they played it well. Mobius and Loki's confusion about trying to figure out the device. That they were clearly completely lost. And
you just can't read the manual.
Yeah, but
just read it.
But they weren't, even though there were comedic aspects of it, they weren't overplaying it. They, it was very human sort of, confusion about things and trying to get something to work. So I thought that was well done.
Now, there's some interesting news that came, and they actually finally listened to you, Paul. So when we were discussing the issues, actually, with Secret Invasion, it wasn't really our favorite show, and you, I think, called out Marvel's streaming series strategy, mainly because of their insistence on not using showrunners. In fact, this show doesn't have a showrunner. Well, a few days ago, as we talk here, Marvel announced that it's scrapping the current version of their Daredevil series and restarting it from scratch. And the most illuminating quote from the Hollywood Reporter article that talks about that says, as it moves forward, Marvel is making concrete changes in how it makes TV. It now has plans to hire showrunners. So, hey, all right. Progress. They discovered the atom. Showrunners. No, I do think it's good news. It doesn't guarantee success, but I think it improves the odds.
Yeah. I certainly hope so. Not to give myself too much credit, I certainly probably read about the showrunner thing in other places, so perhaps that's why that common wisdom sort of.
Yeah, I think it was maybe being talked about at the time.
I think so. Yeah. And, it's possible that, one of the writers is the reason why these 2 episodes, I think, have a strong thread in that somebody, on the story side is definitely looking out for what's going on.
Yeah, to their credit, this is one of those, the exception to the rule, whatever they're showing that in this case, even San's showrunner, this has been a quality show through 2 episodes. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Chicago World's Fair. I think it's coming up in episode 3.
Yeah.
Thank you as always, Paul. Appreciate it, good sir.
No problem.
We'll be back talking about episode 3 next time. Bye.
Bye.